Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Safello Show episode number 15. Today we're going to talk about the Bitfinex hack. But before we get into that, I'll do a quick shout out to our sponsor, which is our own company, Safello.com. Check out Safello.com if you're looking to buy your first crypto or sell crypto. We have a mobile application that you can download on iOS and the Google Play Store. We support Bitcoin, Ethereum, Polkadot, Matic, and Chainlink. And you can also find us on the social media channels here. The Discord channel is becoming sometimes more active, so check that out as well. And then if you are looking to invest in Safello, we have the investor pages where you can find all the information about Safello as a company. We are traded on Nasdaq First North. We have a report coming out next week that you can look at then. That will be on the 16th of February coming out, as you can see here. So with that said, let's get to the show. For this episode, I have invited our COO, Andreas Kennemore. Welcome, Andreas.
Thank
And a
you.
quick,
Nice to be here.
absolutely, great to have you. I'll do a quick shout out to Matt. You want to wave on the production?
Hello,
There he
everybody.
is. You're the biggest fake background everywhere. You nice piano. Do you play piano, Matt?
No,
No.
not really, but I can show my real background today. It's not very pretty.
That's fair enough. All right, thanks for joining, Andreas. I'll give a little bit of background. Last night, for those who were not up late, it was a very interesting thing that happened where the $3.6 billion that was stolen from Bitfinex was recovered and an indictment was announced to these two people. And for me, looking at all the hacks and scams and all of the types of things that happen in the crypto space, it's one of those that fits into sort of the big four. The first one being the Mount Gox hacks with Mark Capellis, where there's a lot of money that was lost there. Then you had the Silk Road takedown with Russ Albright, right? And then you had the OneCoin scam with Crypto Queen. For those who don't know, it's totally worth checking out on the BBC. They did a documentary about it where they go into following the person behind the OneCoin scam, who is never to be found again and still, I think, is missing. With that said, maybe Andreas, you can go with us into the details on what actually is the Bitfinex hack. We now know the amount that was stolen, but maybe going into what actually happened there, and then we can go into what is happening now after that.
Sure. I mean, this was so exciting, so I couldn't resist actually talking about it. It's not that I favor hacks in any way, but it does show a little bit about the maturity of the industry as well. So I think we will cover that during our discussion here. Um, but again, we have to take a couple of years back from the early days of crypto. A exchange was founded in 2012
Mm.
called Bitfinex, and it's a peer-to-peer exchange that offer digital asset trading services to users pretty much around the world. It started as a lending platform from the beginning, and then later added more support for other cryptocurrencies. So it was actually a development into something else. Um, this was not the first time that the Bitfinex was hacked, actually. It was already hacked in 2015, but that was a much, much smaller scale rather than what happened in 2016.
Mm.
Another thing to give a little bit about Bitfinex is also that they are the creator of Tether.
Right.
And what is Tether? For those who are listening in, it is a stable coin, and a stable coin is pretty much pegged to the underlying asset US dollar. And stablecoin is now up for heavy debates, specifically in US, because it's similarities to cash. So stablecoins is certainly something to keep track of. Anyway, back to the actual hack on Bitfinex. In August 2016, Bitfinex announced it had had a security breach. And what happened straight after is that the Bitcoin price plunged by 20%. Why did it plunge by 20%? Because the massive amount of Bitcoins that were stolen. I think the exact number that have been found is 119,756, to be exact. At the time, it was about 72 million US dollars. Today, I think that value is about 4.5 billion dollars. So yeah, the price of Bitcoin has changed since then. Going into the actual hack, at the time, Bitfinex were using BitGo, who is a custodian software provider. And they were, until last year, I think, the biggest one in the world. They've been acquired. Frank, do you remember by who?
BitGo by Galaxy Digital.
Yes.
Novacut. No, yeah.
And they were providing the custodian part and the key signing of how to protect digital assets. And this was the provider that Bitfinex used. The vulnerability seems to lie in how Bitfinex structured its account, and in combination with the use of the Bitcoin wallet that BitGo was providing. So there seemed to be some mix-up in additional security layers that the hackers actually exploited. And to not making it too complicated, they actually found a way to withdraw funds from the wallet, acting like an insider into the Bitfinex system. So this wasn't obvious to most users at the time either. So some users could see it immediately. Other users thought everything was okay. But as we said, it clearly resulted in a massive amount of Bitcoins being moved off and then further distributed out in the ecosystem.
So maybe we can look at the sort of the flow of funds since the hack, because you mentioned the total amount was larger than, I guess, what's now been recovered, right? Or is that correct?
That's correct. Not all funds have been recovered.
And do we know what has happened with the other funds? And I here's an overview of sort of the flow since the initial hack. Maybe it's a bit too much to run through, but maybe high level we can talk a bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, the hacker seems to use different type of washing services, moving funds across through either other exchanges that are not really on the legal side, trying to hide their steps, digital footprints, as much as can. Regarding the question of all the funds, some of the funds might still be in the hands of the illegal people. Not everything has so far been tracked down to this specific seizure that will happen. But in the picture, as you can see, several different movements of the funds have occurred over different time periods, and they all are to hidden the actual underlying movement, and also the one who is actually moving between different anonymous entities into other anonymous entities. So this is a pretty interesting picture of how illegal actors are using this as a tactic to move funds around. So
exactly,
it's a blueprint.
So, and just for people who don't understand, like the logos here, obviously the B is for Bitcoin, but you're also seeing a Monero wallet, which is known for its anonymity, how you can move funds anonymously through it, compared to Bitcoin, which is pretty transparent in how the transactions move about. You don't necessarily know who's behind the funds, but you can see the entire flow of funds, which is how they, I guess, they followed the money, which in a traditional financial market is hard to do, but with Bitcoin you can. And I guess it ended up in a specific wallet or a specific entity from Iiya Lichtenstein that we see here in the graph, which is, I think, from the indictment, this overview, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yes. No, it does end up. I mean, in this case, there are many people involved. For example, the two people that we have that were arrested yesterday, it's not necessarily the ones who actually performed the hack itself. The hack was pretty sophisticated, knowing specifics of how the technology works and so on. And I don't think
that the hackers, that the people who were arrested were not sophisticated? Okay, Matt, cue the hip hop video of this was a married couple, I guess, Heather Morgan and Iiya Lichtenstein, and she was a self-proclaimed rapper. Okay, cue hip hop video and go. Did you have it? There you go. So, yeah, okay, we have to look at this.
This song is for the entrepreneurs and hackers, all the misfits and smart.
What I
Russell Khan, the Versace better win. Come real far, but don't know where I'm headed. Motherfucking crocodile of Wall Street. Silver on my fingers and boots on my feet. Always
when I saw this video, maybe I don't want to, I don't want to interrupt the great hip hop video that is happening. But when I saw the video, I had to remind a little bit of Mr. Robot. That character in Mr. Robot that is the girlfriend of the main character, or the friend of the main character. I don't know if they were together. Anyway, it's like, yeah, coming back to sophisticated hackers, you would say this is not it. Then again, who knows, right? What does a hacker look like? With misconceived notion of what a hacker may or may not look like. But at least this was the married couple that got arrested for the hack. And well, I guess in terms of the sophistication, maybe we can highlight that they found the keys on a cloud drive on the Dropbox, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't really expect that from a serious hacker to leave the private keys in a cloud-based storage. But sure, I mean, even hackers are making mistakes, so I just assume that these things can happen. And by the way, these two people, no, you shouldn't judge a book by the cover. So of course, there's always a chance. I just know that the Department of Justice hasn't accused them for the actual hack. But it might turn out so later.
So all right. So we have $3.6 billion recovered, which is now in the hands of the United States government. Which agency? It's was it the FBI or who confiscated it?
The Department of Justice is the
All
actual
right.
agency.
So it's the same Department of Justice that I think confiscated the Silk Road funds at the time, or was it Homeland Security? And those crypto funds were auctioned off. But in this case, obviously, we're talking about 3.6 billion that originally belongs to Bitfinex, which at the same time has been, in a legal how you say it, scrum with with the United States as well for their involvement with Tether. At the same time, the funds are likely rightfully theirs, which might then flow back to Bitfinex, where if I'm not mistaken, they've created a synthetic sort of token to represent that value to basically keep them above water at the time.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, they created a token called Leo.
Right.
And it was a way to keep it was a pretty interesting move by Bitfinex at the time, because they couldn't make the customers whole. So they had to come up with some creative way of getting people to stick with Bitfinex. and they created this token. I think it was approximately 30% of the funds that were made whole, and the rest they were more or less like, yeah, good luck. In the future, maybe you can trade Leo at a higher price.
It was like it was the first crypto haircut, right? So you had like 30% of the funds of people's account were just removed, which you know, it's pretty amazing that when we're talking about cryptocurrency, crypto exchanges, and we all keep repeating the point of like, you know, not your keys, not your money. Otherwise, you might as well store it with the bank. Well, guess what? That's what happened here. But then the irony now is that of course those tokens are practically I don't know what the market cap of Leo has, but I think it shot up like 50% now based on the recovery, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it's 4.5 billion. It's just
maybe we can pull that up, Matt, to look at the current chart of the Leo coin. What did you say? How much is the current value of the?
4.5 billion US dollar. It's a massive amount of US dollar, of course.
So, sorry for the zoom. I'm sitting in the sun. So here's Leo. This is the token. Is that the correct one? Yeah. Whatever the market cap. Probably then entered into the top 30 of cryptocurrencies. Fully diluted market cap 7.6. Can you just look at the price chart? Is this the correct one? It seems like it's not. But anyway, if we now go forward to speculating on what's going to happen with these funds. So we have on the one end these funds now with the United States government. What do you see happening from here?
Yeah, it's a quite interesting dilemma because the Mt. Gox was where funds were actually supposed to be returned back to the customers.
Right.
Here we have a lot of legal disputes with Bitfinex itself between the American authorities. So there is both a moral and an ethical dilemma here, how these funds should be treated. One thing that I saw going in the social media was that maybe the US authorities returns the dollar value, but keeps the underlying asset. That would then mean that the US authorities are one of the largest holders of crypto assets in the world.
Yeah, I saw a tweet above Tesla, right? Tesla holds about $2 billion in crypto assets. So then they would be almost double, well, not, almost double of that value that Tesla is holding on their books.
Yeah, so it's quite, there are several scenarios. One thing that I think is pretty certain, this whole development will take time. Because I remember the Mt. Gox, it's still not closed. It's been ongoing for many, many years. And so in general, these things take time.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the empty Gox, Mt. Gox, it was originally a Magic the Gathering exchange, so I always still say empty Gox, but let's say called Mt. Gox for argument's sake. They also created a synthetic token. For those who remember, they created a token that would represent the holdings on the exchange, and for a long time, I guess there was a pretty good correlation between the Bitcoin price and the token that were represented by the. I don't know the name of the coin. Anyone who remembers who's watching this, like, please leave it in the comments. So, but they ended up also following the same track as Leo, but obviously it took a long time for those coins to be recovered, and we're still dealing with the proceedings. I now and then get an email in Japanese and English on the from I don't know if you've received the same emails. For anyone who has had funds on empty Gox at any time and committed like to get the tokens back, the crypto back, you always get the updatings on the proceedings, and it's still ongoing after, well, how many years is it? It was 2014, right? The hack, so we're 2022. But if we speculate, then we're talking about all these Bitcoins now. Let's say they do go back to Bitfinex. What happens from there?
It depends. It depends also how Bitfinex is doing, because they could give the funds back to the customers, or they could say that but you have already got your Leo token, and maybe it comes down to ethical and moral things. If it goes that way, sure, people will get some Bitcoins back if it goes that way. Does that then also mean that they all being released to the market at once? I wouldn't say so. It completely depends. And I also read some comments in social media. Oh, but now Bitcoin will go to zero, for example. And remember, we're talking about 95,000 Bitcoins out of approximately 19.5 million. So sure, it could affect price in that situation.
But
again,
just the market order, just dump it all at once. But I mean, historically, if we look at what happened with, let's say, the confiscation of the Silk Road coins, those were brought to auction, right? And they were acquired by Tim Breaker. So if we're looking at an auction model, the likely acquirers of those coins are long-time hodlers, which then means that you're moving funds from, in that case, Bitfinex, which is a listed source, which for people who don't know, like obviously the funds are being tracked. And in Chainalysis, the forensic software on blockchain that most regulated exchanges use, it will be earmarked as funds associated with with obviously illicit funds, and that has been blacklisted from accepting, which means that either way, in the most likely scenario is that those funds go back into the economy. Like, we're talking about fungibility of Bitcoin, but the reality is in the regulated environment, a lot of the Bitcoins are not, fungible at all. They are earmarked, they're blacklisted, and anyone who's interacting with those coins can actually not do anything with it. So they are coming back to the economy. And that, of course, in a way, it also creates, if they go to the right people, creates a lot of interesting liquidity to the market, which people then can, move. Let's say these people that would otherwise not have gotten access to these coins, they might start investing with crypto, start putting it in different protocols. So it could actually have a positive net effect as well, where you otherwise have dormant cryptocurrency that not at all being used in the crypto economy may suddenly be active.
I think it's a great point. I mean, we can see in the market that there are different type of actors or participants now compared to what it was 2016. That was mostly retail based. Now we have an institutional interest which have a completely different view of how they could work with these type of funds. But again, they also are a bit afraid of tainted coins in a way that have a bad reputation for something right. That have crossed government bodies are deemed to be a little bit more on the safe side, because then okay, I've got it from this source, then I can go back and nobody can punish me because I acquire them from a dodgy
So in your KNC Miner times, like for people who don't know, Andreas is one of the founders of KNC Miner, one of the earliest mining companies in the world, and one of the largest at the time. Were people willing to pay a premium for the clean coins that you received out of the mining process? So obviously they never touched the market before. Were institutions or was that not the case yet? And do you believe that has changed now, that people are willing to pay a premium for clean coins?
I see this at the time, and this was 2014 to 2015. I could see a possibility that would be the case, but there were no real ask for it yet, because primarily the institutions hadn't arrived. Right. The retail didn't really care. Why should I pay a premium? I just want to buy the spot price, or at a discount. But from an institution point of view, there are more due diligence. There are more things to think about rather than just buying it off the shelf. Moving into today's, I think it's starting to make more sense for a lot of companies entering the game to understand the implication. The same goes with ESG questions, and the same goes with if it's been tainted in some form. So certainly the question is more relevant today. At the time when I was mining, yes, that is the cleanest form you can ever get, because it hasn't touched any other wallet or any other thing. But nowadays, where so many more coins have been mined or moved around, sure, this comes into a different play. So,
So if we look at the Bitfinex hack that was in 2016, and like how do you connect that to today? And there's still a bunch of hacks going on. Um, what funds are still out there? Like, so we had the empty Gox funds with Bitfinex. Which other ones should we be on the lookout for? The Silk Road ones got returned to the market. Of course, a lot of them have also taken place in the sort of DeFi space. Just the other day, what was it, Wonderland? Am I saying that right? Was it Wonderland where you had the hack as well? And many of the protocols have been hacked in the DeFi space. What is your view on where that space is, and what to expect and what to look out for?
One clarification when it comes to hack: the underlying blockchain has not been hacked, and I think it's important to make that type of distinction. It's the logic that has been built on top of it that has been hacked, and that is still a risk today, of course, even if it's security has been severely improved since those days. There are still coming hobby projects that care more about the cool stuff rather than the security. Not saying that is not important to do the cool stuff, but again, security matters.
Right.
So I think the blockchain itself is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The logic on top, more questionable in some project. Overall, I think the standards are very, very high today. But when we're talking about more complex contractual digital assets, I think the focus has not been so much on security, rather on the cool hype factor.
Well, that was the interesting thing, right? So normally you have audits on these protocols. So you have companies like Open Zeppelin, I think, that do pretty thorough auditing of the underlying protocol before anything goes to market when it's first released. I guess in this case, with what was it? I'm going to say Wonderland until somebody corrects me. But it is Wonderland. Anyway, what I understood, and maybe I'm wrong there, but I understood that they already had they actually identified the bug, and they had a patch for the protocol, but that they submitted it to GitHub for everybody to already see the patch, and that somebody saw that it was up for a release in the release cycle in the sprint, and then I guess basically deconstructed that oh, that's an exploit and I should exploit it. If anyone that's listening in can confirm that that's what happened, that's interesting, right? Because that then also goes into the way that you release software and how you release open source software. So because if a patch gets released, somebody's watching on GitHub what things are released, and they can deconstruct what actually people try to fix there, and then use that to exploit it before it gets deployed. That's that's pretty insane.
And that is, I mean, that's the social media impact of how quickly information transfers across, and also many of those protocols are very, very complex. It's really, really hard for anyone, even including the founders of the actual protocol, to have a good oversight of all potential risk areas. I compare to the historic, I mean, Bitcoin, which was the first one, has been hardened since 2009. And that hardening is, of course, by many people constantly trying to get it hacked. And the same applies for any other new protocol that people are trying, making new things and moving around. This is not the last hack we will see, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's always a cat and mouse game. Thanks for correcting me there, Asher. Yes, Wormhole. I was 50-50 whether it was Wormhole or Wonderland. There is a project called Wonderland, right? And I think that's a different DeFi NFT project. Sorry, Wonderland, if you exist. I obviously meant Wormhole. The interesting thing about Wormhole was it also there was another hack. Maybe there was another hack where that this comes into the protocol side of things, where I guess there was a voting mechanism around it because it was set up in a DAO. I wish we could find that graph where actually the voting was on whether I think to return the funds or where the funds should be going was just a sketchy dev CFO. Maybe we should get Asher on the show. He seems to be on it. And I think they were then there was a voting mechanism, and that goes to show like, okay, what is the future of these kind of protocol changes? Because I think the vast majority of everybody who was putting a vote to the protocol by obviously staking their vote, voted in one direction, and then there was the will, which probably was the founder of the fund of the protocol, who just voted in the other direction in his favor. It wasn't hacked. It just came out that he was convicted for wire fraud. Right? Wasn't he the founder? He was the founder of the Canadian exchange, right? He went undercover in a DAO, which that's an interesting thing about the DAO structure, that obviously can operate anonymously, which both has its benefits, but it also, anyone has a little bit of a dubious past can hide for some period of time until they get discovered. Yeah.
I also see a lot of discussion going on. The ones that are trying to make cross-chain implementation, that you're interacting with two different tokens, for example,
Right.
or two different chains, that these are really, really hard to get right. And the technical implementation, because you're doing one thing, solving a problem in one end, and then you end up actually destroying something in the other end, because they don't have one single purpose. So it is definitely a technical challenge to master these.
Is it like the stacking of complexity? So you have something that's already inherited complex, and you add additional layers of complexity, and then how do you audit that whole thread? I mean, it is amazing what you see with cross-chain applications, and if we just look at things like parachain, where you just execute one trade across different things, or just the bridges that are existing. Anyway, what else can we say about this Bitfinex hack? We're kind of closing to an end maybe here, coming to an end. We talked about how it affects the market. We've shown the funny rep video. Any other great? Well, we have to say, obviously, they're indicted, but they're not convicted, right? Like, if you look, for instance, at the Silk Road hack, then you look at the dubious role that some characters in that whole setup played a role. Where I think even FBI agents at that time were convicted that were trying to confiscate the bitcoins. You obviously never can jump to conclusions with these type of hacks, and I haven't looked at the indictment myself. It seems like there was a lot of things that do lead to these two playing a big role, especially if you look at the flow of funds, and it comes to an entity that is controlled clearly by Iiya. But you never know, right? And as you said, the origin. I think somebody was saying in the comments that it was maybe he liked the theory. What was it now? It was also Asher, I think, who said it. He liked the theory that somehow. I hear this. I hear. I like to hear that these two somehow stumbled upon the BTC for cheap. That will be the ultimate meme culture that we've gone to. It's like, here I found $3.6 billion, and then I can get convicted and go to jail. We'll see how it plays out. In the short term, I think it's really interesting what happens with the funds and where they end up, and how those funds are going to move back to the market and hopefully benefit the market in one way or another. I'm personally not too concerned about a negative impact because they go from blacklisted to above the economy, and there's liquidity to the market, hopefully in a good way. Any closing thoughts from your end, Andreas?
No, but I agree with you. I am not too concerned about the funds itself. I think some learnings to be taken on that now is becoming more mainstream is that there is no really good way to hide in this. Once you want to move those funds out, you actually are being exposed again. So, and we can clearly see this using this technology. And I think that is a very good signal to the traditional world that, okay, if you really want to get a good trace, look at how this technology is using it, because that is at the top of digital standard.
Yeah, nobody in the history of crypto has really been able to hide large large sums of money, it just becomes visible one way or another. So yeah, it's not a really good tool for criminal activity. I think some people were tweeting that as well. Well, guess what? That's true. And that's the positive from my point of view as well, where funds that had been deemed lost for a long time can recover and maybe flow back to the users, and then somebody hodled on their behalf for them, and people may turn overnight rich, which would be great. I think here a note from Matt as that the New York judge granted the two indicted people bail, so at least they don't see him as a flight risk, and don't do anything shady on the blockchain, people. We'll find it out. Yes, Matt. Okay, but with that said, I think we're done for this episode. Very exciting. We'll see. We'll follow the story. It's it's on the one hand, it's obviously terrible when these things happen. On the other hand, it makes crypto exciting as a space to look at these transactions and be able to follow them publicly and then see the truth come out after this many years. It's kind of it's fun, and I know like our compliance team that are doing some of the investigations, they love these kind of breadcrumbs and where they lead, and sometimes they lead to dark places. That is unfortunately the reality of our business. But thank you, Andres, for joining. Thank you for tuning in to episode 15. Thanks, Matt, for the production, and see you next time.